Do you think I'm a crook? Take it out on the book. Horseman, place kick, please. Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Hello and welcome to the Not Ready for Primetime podcast. We're Gary Seath and Brad Robinson.
And you're not.
This week, we're talking about Season 3, Episode 20, with host Buck Henry and musical guest Sun Ra. This show originally aired on May 20th, 1978. Brad, it's the return of Buck Henry yet again.
Yet again. And of course, we can't even pull people along. Everybody knows. The return of Buck means the return of Jon Schneider to the podcast.
Yes,
hey, John, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Buck number 6, gentlemen. Very excited to be here. I know that, with this being a Buck episode and a finale, you needed a guest with a sense of class. No offense to Thomas Senna, but, you got to bring in the big guns for this one.
Ooh, shots fired.
Yeah,
I like it.
Take that, Thomas. John, I will say you guys over at the SNN just finished your host countdown. And initially, I was a little surprised and a little disappointed at how low Buck Henry finished on your list. And then I watched this episode and I was like, man, that feels more appropriate.
Well,
on my personal list or the list that we revealed?
The list you revealed, the show list. Yeah, I'm sorry, not your list.
Yeah, so he came in at 15, and I still think it was very low for what they put him. Not every episode, if you're going to do 10 of these, no one's going to hit home runs every time. I think the guy with the highest hit rate maybe is Walken or maybe Hanks. But, you're not going to have them all be perfect. 15 for Buck Henry all time, I think is low, given how important he was to the show. I think I ended up with putting him on my list at 4 or 5 or something like that. So he definitely should be up there in that top 10. But yeah, not every episode is a home run for Buck. And this one was interesting. There were moments, I think, that he can pull out of here. But I think out of the 10 Bucks, this might be the weakest one. And I'm interested to talk about it and see if you feel the same way.
Interesting.
I wanted to ask you both. Okay, ready? 2 questions, 1-word answers. Gary, you first, then John. Did you enjoy this episode? Yes or no?
No.
John?
Yes.
Do you think this is a good episode? Yes or no?
Yes, I do. I do think it's a good episode.
Gary?
No.
Okay. Because I feel like, to me, and obviously we'll get into it, it was kind of a mix. By the end, I was like, I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed this episode, but I'm not sure if it was a good episode. Which, speaks everything to Buck Henry. It's all about how much you just love watching Buck Henry.
I have to say, I've been following along and listening to your season 3 podcasts that you've been putting out. And I think you guys are doing something fascinating, which is that for decades, it has been, put out there that season 3 is maybe 1, 2, or 3 of, of the greatest seasons of all time. I find it fascinating that you guys, who are probably doing some of the best deep dives into these episodes that I've ever heard, are sort of debunking the theory that this could be the greatest season of all time and may not be the best of the original era, which is fascinating to me because I feel like I really value and respect your opinions. So I love it when anybody comes in with a little bit of a hot take and is watching these episodes. It's like, yeah, this isn't doing it for me the way that the world has sort of just come together and been like, season 3 is the greatest SNL season ever.
Yeah. And I think Brad hit on it when he and I have argued about this earlier this season, where, the highs in season 3 are probably higher and therefore the lows are lower. And that's been the problem for me throughout this season. And I kind of see it a lot here in the season finale, which is, they now have their established characters and everyone kind of plays their part in the cast. And it's not that they're complacent. I don't want to say that. I don't want it to sound like, oh, everyone's just kind of riding through, but it's kind of like they're not taking those shots that they were taking, I think, especially in season 2, where they were trying new things that were a little more off the wall, off the cuff, different for that era. And I know Brad sees this differently than I do.
Yeah, I do like season 3. I do think it's one of the best. And even this episode too, it's funny. They did this a little bit. I feel like you guys both probably remember the end of season 2, where they bring out some recurring characters, some stuff they want you to remember over the summer. And that is what this episode felt like a lot to me. It's like, we want to leave you with a lot of things that and you remember to go off, musical guest aside, to go off into the summer remembering what you love about SNL.
And, when we got together a year ago in SNL time, we were talking about how that finale of season 2 sort of felt like the end of an era. And season 3 is the first, season that starts to feel like SNL today, just sort of feels like a different show in a way. And I wonder if the familiarity between, seeing the season 3 and then, decades later, people watching it sort of makes people feel better on the season as you go all the way through. I certainly feel like the episode that you covered brilliantly with all of your guests with, Steve Martin and the Blues Brothers, that being an episode that's just was released on its own. I think Brad, you said it got released on VHS.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the type of thing where, that episode gets known as the greatest episode ever. So does that translate to this being the greatest season ever? I just think all of these questions become fascinating when you start to nitpick this stuff. But yeah, I think we're at another really interesting moment in time here at the end of season 3. So I think it's a fascinating thing. And then obviously, people doing stuff outside of the show, filming, big hits and coming back midweek and joining the show. I mean, this is all new stuff for the show. So I think it's really, really fascinating point in time in SNL history. And I'm glad to be able to cover it with both of you.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
Yeah. It's been a fun season. I know we've gone up and down, and especially at the beginning of the season, but I think it's been a very fun season. I've loved going through it all again, and I'm excited to wrap it up today.
I'm also excited to wrap it up. So should we just get into it?
Let's do it.
All right.
Yep.
So I don't usually talk about this, but the bumper this week, the bumper open is the boy in the plastic pantsuit. And the image
is that John Travolta?
That's what I was going to say. It was John Travolta's head cut out onto a body dressed in plastic. And that's the only reason I caught my attention was because it's, again, a callback to John Travolta, who Bill Murray called out earlier this season for not appearing on the show. And I thought that was funny.
Yeah. We haven't had a cold open disclaimer in a while. It's been a few weeks.
I think it's hilarious.
Well, then we get the cold open, and it starts with the presidential music coming up, and you see a desk, and Dan comes out, but not as Jimmy Carter. He comes out as Richard Nixon. So he sits down at the desk, and basically he's shilling his book, which no one is buying. He mentions the campaign in DC, which is the Don't Buy Books from Crooks, which Dan wore this T-shirt last week.
Last week at the Good Nights, yeah.
It was last week's Good Nights. And he's referencing the fact that no one is buying this book, and he references the price. And then he goes back to his 1962 gubernatorial loss in California, where he says, you don't have Dick Nixon to kick around anymore. But if you are mad at me, you can buy my book and kick it around. And that's the joke. So I don't know how well this played now, but I think at the time it probably was more relevant because they still like kicking Dick Nixon around.
Literally.
Yeah.
I mean, the book did just come out, I believe, that week. So it is timely. My first thought was, God, they just still love sticking it to Nixon, don't they? But, again, as we saw this season, Dick Nixon won't die. He still shows up. So it was fine. It's not the worst cold open we've seen all season. Not the best. It's simple and easy and does the job. A few good lines in it. I did like the part where Dan's talking to the audience and says, you don't have to read it, although I originally wrote it to be read. Well, it worked.
Yeah, I think that Aykroyd's Nixon is a better impression than Aykroyd's Carter.
I agree. Yeah.
And I enjoy it more. And it's almost a shame. I mean, this is like a weird take, but it's almost a shame that we didn't get to see Aykroyd play Nixon in Office, because I think that would have been like some epic political satire. But I love whenever we get something like this. There's more to it. I think, Carter ultimately ends up being a pretty boring guy, where Nixon is just, I guess you could say it's almost like Trumpy, where they took the best parts of a ridiculous figure and like found a way to make it, humorous.
It's a better performance. I feel the writing for the Jimmy Carter stuff is better, but the performance for Nixon is Dan just does a much better and more interesting and fun job playing Nixon than he does Carter.
Yeah. And Nixon's much more polarizing than Carter, too, especially at this point. So it's easy for Dan to really dig into that impression that he's doing and take it to the next level, which is fun.
The writers are almost at their best when they're going at somebody instead of writing around somebody.
Yeah, he's easier to poke fun of.
Yeah. I agree. Well, from there, we get the opening credits come up, and we see that both Mr. Mike and Franken and Davis are making appearances this week.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, you never see them together on the same episode. I was like, all right, here we go.
Yeah. So then Buck comes out for the monologue, and he understands that people are questioning why he should be the host for the season finale now. And even though the show's in its third season, couldn't they get a bigger guest? But he has been working with Warren Beatty and Julie Christie. And as he's waxing poetic about his time on the set of Heaven Can Wait, which he was co-directing with Warren Beatty at the time, the Chiron comes up to tell us that Buck is delusional and does not know Warren Beatty and is just a sad, lonely man.
Yeah, it was really fun. I do like these crawls, and they always get me, and they never feel like unoriginal. And it's just become a staple of what he does. And again, like it sort of leads into a lot of comfort that we're going to get throughout this episode with, they're going to play the hits. And I think that this one is good, and it probably because they could be more flexible with what they put on screen than some of the beats you're going to get in the other sketches. But I do enjoy this monologue.
Yeah, you knew it was coming. You knew the Chirons were coming up. And when I saw them and he started mentioning Warren Beatty, I thought the Chiron joke was going to be how they tried to get Warren Beatty. And he either said no or he bailed on them and like Buck was a last minute replacement. That's where I thought they were going to go. This was a good twist on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you knew they were going to go at Buck in some way. And the way at which they went at him was a little harsher than I was expecting, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was funny.
Yeah. And we talked about this, I think, in some other episodes where it's like, because Buck is such a normal guy and so not a big name outside of SNL, like people know him, but people don't know him. Like it's like he's so good at making fun of himself. And that is just why it's easy to fall in love with him.
Well, the Chiron even mentions that The Graduate was 10 years ago and how sad that was.
But it's funny because this, I think, is the one time in the 5 years, 10 times Buck shows up. He actually does, in theory, have something to be on the show for. Heaven Can Wait comes out next month, and it goes on to win, nominated for 9 Oscars. Buck's nominated for Best Director with Warren Beatty. So it's the one instance where there is actually something he's involved in coming out in the near future or semi-relevant, but they go right after it and make fun of him anyway.
Yeah, it's a funny dig at Buck.
I think this is just another credit to him. And, John's comment about, how Buck should be kind of high up in that upper echelon of host is, I think, a great acknowledgement of a great host is you just want to see what they do as a host, and that includes the monologue.
And it's also like playing this on hard mode, right? Because if you think about it, like you're watching this live at home in the 70s, you can't rewind and rewatch it. So basically you're having to process two different things at the same time. What's being read on screen and what Buck is saying, and be able to still find it funny. So it's like, you're not watching this on easy mode. And I think they pull it off really well, where he has to deliberately talk slowly for the pacing to work. So it's almost like he's talking it's a little bit of an art, what I think he's doing. So totally I don't think it's as simple as it seems.
It's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
He does an excellent job at that. And it's the same thing we'll see later with Samurai too. It's just it's another monologue, really, and the way he delivers it is great. But first, we get to see him in a nerd sketch. So the nerds are going to the prom, and we open with Lisa and Mrs. Lupner talking about the facts of life before Todd takes her to the prom. And then Todd comes to pick her up 30 minutes exactly before he's supposed to be there. And he shows up with his father, Buck, who will be their chauffeur to the prom.
So, where's the belle of the ball?
Oh, she's upstairs making herself beautiful.
Ba, 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 boom!
Thank you, Mr. Deal-About-Time.
Well, since we seem to be handing out compliments, that's a stunning housecoat you're wearing, Mrs. Lupner.
Why, thank you, Todd.
It's not hard to see where Lisa gets her good looks.
Oh, flattery will get you everywhere, but don't let my daughter hear you say that. Can I get anyone a beverage? Marshall, would you come out and help me?
Oh, sure, let us old fogies leave the young folks alone. Well, you look nice, I guess.
So do you.
Here, I got you this.
Oh, thanks, Todd. Oh, this is really beautiful, Todd.
It's a wrist corsage. You wear it on your wrist. And this is your graduation gift from me.
Really?
There's those special prom noogies that you ordered.
I thought this was a really fun way to start the show.
I mean, this is classic nerds. John was talking about breaking out the hits. This is probably one of the most iconic versions of the nerds. The two of them on the couch. Here's your prom noogies. I mean, that little clip of Bill and Guild on the couch together is one of the ones they will always show. Probably the most iconic clip of the Nerds. So this is an easy top 3 nerd sketch of all time that they start the episode off with.
You know, everyone remembers the Nerds for Bill and Gilda, who are fantastic, but I think Jane and Buck are so good in this.
Yeah.
And, you know, that is one of the more underrated storylines of Buck Henry in the original era, is his chemistry with Jane Curtin is so fantastic.
Yes.
You see it in these sketches where they sort of have like a little bit of a flirtiness going on between them. And even in another sketch later this night, it comes up again. So it's a recurring theme that I feel like these two are really great performers together. I think that Buck and Jane are actually, to me, the big stars of this version of the sketch.
They're really what helps push this above and beyond and over the top. I really love that they opened this sketch and started it with Gilda and Jane together and featured them for a while. It was a really great few minutes of just watching them. It works really well. It's really funny, but they're also just both so engaging to watch those two women go at it before the guys show up. It was great. And then, like you said, Buck comes in and he's all in. His host is all in. You can just tell he's having a blast being a nerd. And you see the 4 of them just go back and forth, and, you know, parents leave, come back. It's a great ensemble piece. The writing's great, and the performance by, like you said, John, all 4 of them is top notch.
Yeah, I love the line, John Travolta, watch out. That's awesome. And honestly, the backstory of what happened to Mr. Loopner, who was born without a spine and invented the slinky, but forgot to patent it, and now gets no money for the invention. I just think it is, there's a lot of good writing in this one. So like full credit to Ann Beats and Rosie Schuster for everything they put into this.
Yeah, this was excellent. Even giving Gilda and Bill that moment alone on the couch to do their thing. It wasn't too long. I didn't think. I thought it was like a nice little spot right in the middle for them.
I will say, I do think that the Bill, when it's just Bill and Gilda in the room together, I do feel like these sketches die a little bit.
Yes, I agree with you, because I feel like we've seen that and we see, you know, the same build up to the same types of jokes anyway. And that's why I liked that this was in the middle of the sketch, and it was not, I just felt like it was long enough to remind us and then get out and bring back the new characters and give us that new dynamic.
I like this one.
I like this one a lot. Yeah.
I do too.
With the exception of the weird ending. Like, we basically stayed on the set for Jane to walk and turn off 2 different lights and then exit. So I don't know if something was supposed to happen, or it did feel a little clunky there at the end, but whatever.
No, I didn't care at that point. I was just, that was more curious than anything. It didn't take it didn't take away from me.
No.
Well, we have Buck Henry, which means that we also are going to have a samurai sketch. And this time we get an episode of Samurai TV Repairman, where Buck brings in his TV that's broken. It needs to be fixed before the big game.
Right off the bat, that's funny.
Samurai TV Repairman.
Yeah. It's just so silly.
Yeah, I mean, it was a typical samurai sketch with John and Buck, and you know, he throws the TV on the ground and picks it up, and it's suddenly working.
Yeah, I am a big defender of the samurai sketches. I do believe that we've passed the point of these being interesting and exciting. Like, I do think the chemistry between Belushi and Buck is awesome. I just don't know that the sketches do anything different than what we've seen before. So I'm sure it's very exciting if you were watching this live, but the whole, like, him, you know, taking the handle of the sword to like move it in and out to, like, you know, imply that, you know, they're going to do it. Like, you know, those are beats that they sort of hit before. The throwing down the TV and then it suddenly being fixed, I feel like I got like a good chuckle out of that, but I don't know. I hate that I didn't love this as much as I wish I could have.
Yeah, for me, this is a prime example of what I was kind of bringing up in the beginning of enjoyable, but maybe not good. I like this sketch. I thought this was really funny. I like that they didn't put it first up either. I like that they featured the nerd sketch, which I think is a better sketch, and they put the samurai sketch, which I think for the last 5 times we've had Buck was the very first sketch of the night with him.
Yes.
That they moved it down a little bit. This plays a lot, I feel like, into what John talked about, familiarity. It's very reminiscent of their first one. Buck comes in and there's the talk about watching the basketball game and John's doing anything. And it's like they just rewrote the football dialogue from Delicatessen into a basketball dialogue, which I enjoyed as a viewer just watching. It didn't take the sketch anywhere or anything different. And yes, it's a blatant recycle, but I still found it fun. Buck and John still play great together. Buck's understanding all the gibberish. She's like, what do I need? A tube? Oh, a transistor? I'll get a transistor. Like, that still works for me. I liked the idea where they had the joke about This was the one piece I did think was a little bit fresh. The joke to get Jon to almost kill himself when Buck pulls the inspection tag out of the TV and he says it's number 68. And Jon's going to kill himself because Buck's talking bad about his mother and his mother was inspector number 68. And then Buck says, oh, no. It was upside down, 89. And Jon's like, woof. So I like that. I like that part. I thought that was a little bit of a fun way to make it a little bit different. You know, the TV's not working. I did like the part where Jon shoves knives in the top of the TV to give it bunny ears and starts to adjust them for the picture to come in. I mean, it was a nice physical gag that I thought worked. So I enjoyed this. I actually did. I enjoyed the sketch a lot.
You hit on what I think was missing for me from the sketch, which was like props that were funny. I just didn't think that, you know, the TV and the rabbit ears and stuff like that were the props that, you know, made some of these other sketches work better. Like sometimes they're in such a unique situation where the samurai is like working at a place you wouldn't expect, and then he uses the set around him to create funny moments. And I just felt like this was too similar to other things we've seen before and probably too bland.
Yeah, I agree with Jon. The only funny thing for me really was the inspector. When he turns it over, he's like, oh, nope, 89. Everything else to me, it just felt far too forced and recycled, not fresh enough.
But you do get the vibe that they're kicking off this finale and they're going to give the audience everything they want to see going into the summer. Nixon, nerds, Belushi. It's like, and I will say they're featuring everybody really great so far this episode. You got to expect there's a Garrett Lorraine something.
Well, Garrett's in it. Lorraine's in a little bit at the end.
Lorraine's in it. They are in it, technically.
They are in it, technically. And this is not something that they were throwing out so you hope you remember it in the summer. Maybe they are. But it's a meeting of the Sodom Chamber of Commerce. So the mayor of Sodom is played by Buck. And he's worried about his city's reputation and how narrowly they're seen by others in the plains of Jordan. So he's asked Noab, played by Bill, to come in and help them work on their reputation.
Gentlemen, you know, I was looking over your official city brochure. Now, what kind of city slogan is this? You have to be crazy to live in Sodom, crazy about sodomy. Now, if you're going to attract investment, if you expect to have your bid for the Olympics taken seriously, you're going to have to play down the sodomy.
Play it down. I mean, come on. What do you think brings the conventions in here? A guy looking for a place he can gamble, practice gluttony, worship a false idol or two, and have a little sodomy. Right. Automatically thinks of Sodom.
He's got a point there. All right, now look at Gomorrah, okay? Now, they're every bit as wicked as you people, but it's just not the main thrust of their publicity. They emphasize more conventional things. I think Sodom should too.
No, like what?
Well, like the park. Like your museums, like your restaurants, like your theater district.
Oh, yeah, and the human sacrifice.
No. You see, our people around the empire, they sort of perceive human sacrifice not as a civic attraction, but as another one of the wicked things about Sodom.
Yeah, but we don't want to look like goody-goodies.
No, Asher, you needn't worry about that. I'm sure anyone who's really interested in sodomy will know to come here. Word of mouth will take care of that. I think that what Noab is saying is that we don't have to bend over backwards to advertise. Exactly.
It was funny because I thought, well, if any host is going to have a Sodom Chamber of Commerce, it makes sense that it's Buck, in my opinion.
Horny Buck, you mean? Of course.
Yeah.
I will say, I was watching some interviews, old interviews with Buck Henry, and he does quote this as one of the all-time favorite sketches he's ever done on the show, the Sodom Chamber of Commerce. He loves it. He said, this was an idea, quote, I could have done that for a long time. And then I'm thinking, I was like, oh, right. Horny Buck,
He's
of
a
course.
big anal guy.
Yeah.
He did make an anal reference quote in the interview.
So I think a lot of people don't like this sketch, from what I remember. I do like it. I think it's cute and clever. It's pretty like, there's not much to it beyond the puns, but like I love puns. It hits me in all the right places. And
I like that.
I apologize for the delay. It took me a minute.
Yeah. And I don't know. After I watched it, I felt good.
I like this sketch. I didn't think it was bad. looking at it in the whole, it's interesting because it's such a kind of outlier for this episode because it's kind of really the only original piece we get. But at this point in time in the episode, I am enjoying it. My first note was Buck is really putting in the work. 3 for 3. We've got 3 sketches. He's in all 3, like very featured. It's not like he just phones in, has a line and walks out. So I love seeing Buck in a lot of stuff. And I thought it was original, and it was a decent group piece. It highlights the host well, but it also it's a very good ensemble piece. It's kind of that classic sketch idea where here's a group of people coming to talk about something. And that's the basis of the sketch. And they just made a fun twist of that. And now it's the Chamber of Commerce in Sodom. But overall, I think it's a plus sketch. I get it. Enjoyed it.
I agree. Yeah, I was happy because at the end of this sketch, I liked that it was the ensemble piece that you talked about, Brad. I kind of wanted it to be a little longer so that I could get more from everyone in this setting. But I liked it overall.
Yeah, you don't have to bend over backwards to like this sketch.
Yeah, that's a good one. This is a good line. So Weekend Update comes on, and my first note was, why is Dan wearing sunglasses?
That would be mine as well.
Okay. All right.
Do you think it was him rebelling against Sun Ra?
Being that we don't really reference the sunglasses and they don't play any part in the Weekend Update at all,
right?
John might be onto something.
Maybe. It starts out with, some jokes about the Preakness and frying ground beef, which turns into a McDonald's joke, and that'll come back later.
That was kind of funny, the McDonald's joke.
Yeah. Dan shoots a gun in the air.
That was loud.
I was just going to say that. It was loud. And then we get something we haven't seen for quite a while, an artist's rendering of the David Berkowitz trial with Lorraine doing the voiceover from the trial. But yeah, we haven't seen one of these in quite a while.
They're still funny. Still very funny. The Tom Schiller drawings.
I thought these were fun because we haven't seen them for so long. And I thought the drawings were actually really funny, talking about the dog.
The dog was good. I like the last one where she's doing the sign off in the picture and there's a big wave and she's waving goodbye.
Yes.
That was my favorite one.
Come back for Charlie Chaplin and Princess Margaret jokes. And then Bill Murray, Stargazer, comes on, also wearing sunglasses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sun Ra glasses.
Maybe this is a thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love this theory.
He's reviewing the new film Greek Tycoon, which, of course, he hasn't seen. So he shows us a clip. And then he immediately calls out the stealing the line, "Excuse me," from Steve Martin. And then he puts 2 and 2 together and realizes that the synopsis is far too close to Jackie Kennedy's life. And he tries to call her, and then he just speaks to her in camera. Not the strongest Bill Murray Stargazer, in my opinion, but it was okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but you can't help but watch it and just feel like, okay, it would be great to see what he could do on Weekend Update. So I totally get where they're looking at him and just feeling like, okay, he's very well suited for the desk. So, yeah, I do like it when he's very, I like it when he has some swagger to him and he really just, goes full Bill Murray. I don't think he was giving 100% to this, though.
Yeah, certainly didn't feel that way. Then we come back for a few jokes, one about Betty Ford, and then Dan does a whole commentary on first ladies who have been drunk in the White House. That was fine. And then we get point counterpoint, and they can't agree on who's going to take the affirmative on jogging, which I thought was fun. Like them showing like, yeah, it's whatever.
Yeah.
These point counterpoint segments, not necessarily on Weekend Update, but the grander, right? These were a popular thing in the 70s. The grander point counterpoint is kind of malleable and just doesn't mean anything when you're arguing on either side.
It kind of would have been funny if they would have actually switched. So we don't get the typical Jane starts, Dan counters. It would have been funny if they reversed it and Dan started and Jane came back at him. It might have been interesting.
I like the Dan, you overweight porker. I like it when she really, gives it to him. But I will say I enjoy these. These are some of my favorite bits from the 70s update pieces and probably for the best that we see less of Dan Aykroyd in the future on Update for him to then come on and do this rather than having gotten him for 10 minutes and then he does this.
Yeah, I agree.
But overall, as we're ending the tenure of Aykroyd on Update, like what are the feelings?
I got to say, not the biggest fan. And it's so funny watching this episode tonight. Part of me wondered if Dan was wearing the sunglasses as kind of a sign of like goodbye to Update. Like he knew he was not coming back. Like, I don't care how much you guys ask me, I'm not doing Weekend Update in season 3 because he never felt comfortable in it. He never really fell into a good vibe. I think we had maybe 1.5 episodes where he and Jane really vibed and played off each other well. we have always been huge fans of Jane and thought Jane was doing more than competently well at the end of season 2 and could have hung on by herself. So I don't mean to like knock on Dan because he's he is such a great performer, but I just think this was just a fit that he was never good in.
Yeah, I think he definitely got into it the more the season went on, and they did have a few shows where they totally clicked, but I still don't think he's comfortable playing Dan Aykroyd, and we don't see him say his actual name most of the second half of the season. So
yeah. Just because somebody is so great at sketch comedy doesn't mean that they're the person that should be quarterbacking the Weekend Update segment. So it would be like you wouldn't put Bill Hader as the Weekend Update anchor. You put Seth there because he's the right guy for that. And I think that this is, it's not a knock on his legacy at the show, but it is probably the one, point where you go back and you're like, what could we have gotten extra from Dan in season 3 had he not been forced to do this segment week after week?
Well, that's interesting because I don't know that he really held anything back, because he's all in on so much of the show and so much of the season still, that I just felt like he didn't necessarily hold back from anything else, but he did not put the effort into this. Like, this was definitely it felt like it was his lowest priority of the season for me.
I will say, though, I do feel like we have a lot less Dan Aykroyd penned sketches season 3. I don't think we're getting a lot of sketches written from Dan or coming from the mind of Dan as we did in season 2, or say even season 4 when he takes steps away from the Weekend Update. So I think, to John's point, I think we might have seen a little bit more from the writing side of Dan, maybe, if he wasn't on Update. But this is also a great point. The show is still evolving. It still is constantly changing. And, John mentioned, having Bill on this episode was one last chance to see him at the Update desk and how he performs, because as we know, into the next season, Bill does a very great job. And I think, John, you've talked about this on your show a couple times, underrated job of taking over the Update desk along with Jane. And they do find a really great spot for Dan as the station manager of Weekend Update to come on and do the point counterpoint. So, maybe it took a little longer than they wanted to, or we wanted to, for them to figure out the Weekend Update mix. But, the journey's still happening. They will get there come season 4, I think. Much, much better setup than this season.
Yeah, definitely. That's the end of the Weekend Update, which was brought to us by Paraquat.
That was good.
Keeping your lungs insect free. Yeah, I knew you'd like that. We roll right into Olympia Diner. We're hitting all the same beats now in the Olympia Diner sketch. Gilda orders her usual. Jane wants something different. John pushes back. This time Garrett wants a refill on his coffee, and John argues with him.
There
and
he is.
Yeah.
Knew he was in this episode.
And then Buck comes in from the Lisa Doberman, or Rent a Doberman, he went both ways with it, company to talk to him about renting a guard dog, which then they realize that Nico, who's Bill, sleeps in the back. Well, he couldn't do that with the guard dog, so John fires Bill, who stands outside the window and just, like, his expression, he doesn't say a word, but just like so forlornly looking in the window because he just got fired. I thought he was very good in this. The back and forth between John and Buck, I thought, was very good too, where they're haggling over the price. This did bring a different element to the Olympia Diner sketches, and I think Buck's a good addition.
Well, it's funny. I wanted to ask you, because the last time we saw this, it was Jill Clayburgh trying out to be a waitress. And I think one of my criticisms was like, she's just not good in this role, and you need a host who can bring something. I think I even referenced Buck. I was like, you bring an Elliot Gould or a Buck Henry in to do something. And I was a little underwhelmed with Buck. I didn't think there was a lot to it.
I totally disagree.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I love these sketches. When I first watched the original era of Saturday Night Live, I saw the Coneheads and I was like, oh, these are my favorite characters. I love the storyline. And then I discovered these sketches and I was just so excited because it really feels like a sitcom within SNL. I love that there's always like multiple storylines going on. Like at one point he goes downstairs because there's a goat that's on the loose and he's like carrying a machete downstairs. Don Novello in the back and he's always like looking around. Like everyone is playing a part here to the point where you could just like, you could watch the sketch 5 times and notice something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that about this sketch. Is this the best version of all the Olympic Cafes? Probably not. But I think that the idea that we're going to have somebody come in here, that they're going to kick out Nico, who Bill, this is some of my favorite things in SNL overall is I love it when you have a performer who is so, out like large and outside of themselves that can go out there and do, could sing songs and just take over the room. And then you get him in this sketch and he plays it so just quiet and subdued. And he does this role so well where you just feel for him. There's the emotion you see on his face as he finds out that he's going to be fired. Then he gets back in, then he gets kicked back out. So for me, like these work every single time. And like spoiler alert for best bit, but I have to, consider this as being the highlight of the night for me.
Oh,
I will say this is a great example of something we've seen a lot in season 3, which I've loved, that now that Bill Murray is so much more comfortable in his role in the show, it's Bill Murray stealing a sketch that is not a Bill Murray sketch. And he does this a lot this season. Like you said, John, they do a great job with the lamb, which causes Belushi to leave, which of course leaves Bill by himself with Jane. So the whole her ordering Jane and Bill just has that blank look as he nods and just, says nothing, just reacts. And then I agree. My favorite part of this sketch was the 2 or 3 times John fired Nico and sent him outside. Bill would stand on the outside of the glass window looking in at John and Buck with that face and then come back in. I thought he just stole this sketch, which he's been doing all season.
yeah.
Yeah. This is one of those ones that like with the passing of Belushi, I feel like we would have gotten more Olympia cafes like decades later. It just was such a popular sketch. It was one that, it was one that I feel like they could have like gotten the crew back for.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, it's a personal favorite of mine. And I was like so excited when it popped up in this episode.
I could see that.
I mean, it is a decent sketch. I think it's a decent sketch. It didn't feel as forced as the last one. For some reason, that Jill Clayburgh sketch just felt really forced when they tried to get all the lines out. I think, you know what it is? I feel I might just been expecting too much because it was Buck.
Well, our next bit is definitely not out of a sitcom. It's Mr. Mike's least loved music. So it's Mr. Mike singing about baby ghouls. And then we see Lorraine in the inset pops up as a vampire. And she's just dripping blood. She has blood all over her gloves and her blouse. And eventually she comes on and bites Mr. Mike's neck.
I'll let the two of you go because I know you're both going to hate this. And then
I don't hate it. I just don't like it. It doesn't work for me. And I know there's people out there who this will work for, and they love Michael Donahue and everything he brought to the show. It's just like I think I can accept that. I can accept it more because I believe that this is the last episode where Donahue is the head writer of the show, at least for a while.
Yeah.
I guess they're going to give him this spot in the show. It's just so different than what the show is now. Like in season 1, where it felt like more of a variety show, I don't care as much if you're going to like cut to this random like horror segment, but it just doesn't feel like part of the show anymore. Knowing
that this is Mr. Mike's last show, I mean, this is Michael O'Donoghue's last show where he's a writer for now. Like you said, he comes back. And knowing that we heard we were going to see Mr. Mike, 1, I kind of expected it to be Needles in the Eyes. But 2, I kind of wanted it to be, if it wasn't going to be that, I wanted it to be a Lisa Love bedtime story or something. Mm-hmm. Again, we're in this show where everything's comfort food. We've seen all of this stuff again. And I was kind of expecting that from Mr. Mike. And this was very different than what I was expecting. But Brad, you liked this?
No, I did not. I just wanted you guys to get it out of the way.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you wanted us to get that, guys?
Yeah, basically. No, I did not like the singing Mr. Mike. I don't think that worked very well at all. I think if you're going to send Mr. Mike out, have it be a Least Loved bedtime story. I agree entirely with that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they were trying to make any kind of a statement or anything about being funny or satirizing anything with him singing. It was just him to sing. So I think without that, it was just like another vehicle to do a Mr. Mike. And I don't think it worked. It was almost laughable, I want to say, at the end. And I don't mean in a good way. Like it was like a sad, like, this is what you want to do.
Yeah.
But I did like Lorraine. I was like, of course it's Lorraine, doing the sign language on a Michael O'Donoghue piece. I did like that and enjoy seeing her. To Gary's point, I like that they put it on. Originally Michael O'Donoghue wanted to kill off the Mr. Mike character at the end of season 3. He had this plan of doing a Least Loved bedtime story where he was going to be lying in bed, dying, and telling a story about when he was a little kid and had a dog. And then, of course, the dog would, have a violent death. And then Mr. Mike himself would fall over and die. So I don't know where in the aspect of that or how far he actually had that idea going, but at some point he was trying to end the Mr. Mike and moving on. And I do wonder, we've hit upon it a couple times this season. Season 3, we've watched O'Donoghue come down in his influence on the show, and Franken and Davis rise up. So it's like, does he know? Like, I've always wondered, does he know he's done after this episode? Does he know season 3 is his last one? Because he looks like he's enjoying it. Like, personally, like, he has a big smile at the end. He actually looks like he's having fun, and we'll see him at the Good Nights front and center. So it's just an odd choice, an odd vehicle to bring Mr. Mike out in the finale.
Well, we move past Mr. Mike to get the TV show More Insects to Worry About, hosted by Joan Face. Again, right? We've seen Insects to Worry About.
But she was not Joan Face the last time. She was Jane.
She wasn't?
But we have seen her play Joan Face in other talk shows.
I thought she was Joan Face in that one.
I don't think so.
That was the one with John, though, right? John was in the first one.
Yeah, we mentioned it. So the first time they wrote this More Insects to Worry About, it was originally written for Buck's first time this season. It got to dress, and then it didn't make it. It played the next episode with Mary Kay Place. But yes, it was Jane interviewing John as the doctor. And I remember us saying, we guarantee when they wrote this last week, it had to have been for Buck, because Buck would have been so great in this role. Actually, that's what I feel like when they had Buck coming back, and that sketch played, in my opinion, so poorly the first time we saw it with Mary Kay Place episode.
Yeah.
That the writers were like, we were right. It was funny. It should be with Buck. We're putting it back on with Buck.
And they do.
And they do.
He comes on as Dr. Russell Bedanza, who talks about the Bedanza mite, which burrows into a human's brain and makes art with loose objects that it takes into the brain. And I think, John, you mentioned this earlier. This sketch is all about flirty Buck and flirty Jane. Like, their chemistry is, I mean, that's what they end up calling it out. But you can sense it very early on in this sketch even.
I completely agree. And that's really the only takeaway from, I walk away from the sketch looking at it. I mean, I just feel like there's nothing interesting about all the bugs and the weird stuff that they're talking about here. So there's this undercurrent of, okay, like between the two of them. And, it does feel like a little bit of a storyline that we get to see throughout, the original era, is just these two together. And yeah, I liked it for that reason, but beyond it, I could see why it was cut the first time, or why it didn't really work with Belushi either, the version of the sketch. So I don't know. This one didn't really work for me beyond that.
I agree. I liked it in the historical context because I knew about the last episode, but as a random viewer, as a casual viewer watching the show, I don't think you're going to like this sketch very much. I do think Buck is better in it than John. And to John's point, yeah, the best takeaway of this sketch is that Buck Jane back and forth. It was fun to watch the two of them together.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun to watch the two of them together, especially after seeing them earlier in the nerd sketch. Well, we get the two of them again in the next sketch, playing actors on set of director Bill Murray's piece that he's directing.
Jane is everywhere tonight.
Yeah. She's got that chemistry with Buck. That's true.
What we're saying. You're right.
Yeah. This time, Bill is on as director, and Gilda is playing a 12-year-old girl who's playing a 10-year-old girl on set. And they're doing a stunt puppy scene. So this, again, is something that we saw on Buck's earlier episode.
Right.
Last time it was stunt baby, and this time it's stunt puppy. Again, all the same beats. I enjoyed this one, though. I still think this concept of the stunt whatever is funny.
I love Stunt Baby. I think that's the one that we talked about. Yeah, that is the one we talked about last time. And to me, that is like a sleeper sketch for season 3, and one that I think, I would start to put in a best of. Stunt Puppy, I think, has diminishing returns. I don't know, I don't know what this says about me. Like, I'd rather see him just wreck a baby than a puppy.
Oh, let's lay down on the couch, John. Let's talk about this.
Let's dive into this a bit more.
Yeah, let's talk. I need the samurai psychiatrist. But yeah, I do feel like, despite my feelings on it, they didn't do enough with the puppy to escalate the sketch from the first time.
Yeah, it's another one for me. Again, I really enjoyed it. I don't know how quote unquote good it is, but I enjoyed watching it. The dog is so fake. It's so stupid that it's so funny. Buck literally, when they do the switch, he's got a stuffed dog, and he at one point he's just whipping it around the room, like not even pretending to hide the fact that it's a fake dog. He's just lassoing it around the room, and of course then throws it out the window. I just love the fact that they wanted to find a way to try to take Stunt Baby even farther. I agree with John. I don't think it necessarily worked. I agree with diminishing returns, but I do like the idea they took a sketch like Stunt Baby, and Buck comes back and they're like, we have to do another one somehow. And right. I like that they made the attempt.
Same.
Yeah. I feel like they knew it was the season finale. And so they just took all of their favorite things from the season and were like, just like rewrite a little bit here and there, make it a little bit different. And that's exactly what this felt like.
Yes, a lot of times. Samurai, Olympia Cafe, this sketch just a little bit. We're going to see it in the next sketch just a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that they were trying to make this worse than the stunt baby.
Right.
By people feeling like more empathy for the puppy. But I don't know that throwing the puppy out the window was enough to do that. Like, I think they had to do something more like horrific to the puppy to really make you feel like this is like, oh, wow, if you like that first one, you got to see the second one.
I think their way they tried to do it, John, I think you're exactly right. Remember the first time it was a baby doll wrapped up in a blanket. You didn't see it very well. This time we're like, we're going to show you, we have a live dog. It's a real dog. And you could tell that it was a real dog. So I think that's the way they tried to do that. But I agree with you. I don't think it succeeded in what they wanted to do. But I think that's how they tried to do that is, having the real dog and the real stunt dog comes back out.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because they definitely kept that shot on like camera one for too long because you saw Garrett and Buck like huddling in the corner to hide the fact that they were switching out the dog. And as soon as you saw the window, you knew the dog was going through it.
Oh, the dog knew that. The dog knew what was coming. When they're sitting there talking and Buck starts yelling, you see that dog try to like crawl under the couch and hide behind Gilda? That dog knew what was happening. It's like, I've seen this sketch before.
Like, big fan, but not me. Well, we move on to another sketch that we know really well. It's the Bad series. And this time it's Bad Conceptual Art. This bad conceptual art is called Pavlov Video Chicken 1. So Dan explains that it's a woman doing a chicken walk as part of this art piece. And the only thing that caught my interest was I thought it was going to be Lorraine doing the chicken walk.
Yes, I agree. It feels like a missed opportunity.
Because she did that great chicken impression. Was that season 1?
Season 2, the little known talents.
Right,
of the
that's
cast.
what it is.
Yeah. No, I 100% I agree.
Yeah, I feel like I really, really love these bad sketches. I think they started to like run out of ideas for like what do like plays and operas and things like that. And now we're sort of getting into like weird stuff, like conceptual art. And yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I like about them in some of the other versions is like they then introduce all the actors and they say like so-and-so was played by so-and-so. And like there's another beat to this sketch.
Yep.
Whereas this one just sort of ended. It was a little, it didn't, I thought it was going to be better than it was, I think is what I'm trying to say.
I had a theory on this and we can add this to my list of Brad's bullshit theories, but it's very short, the sketch. And I wonder if the episode found itself short and they needed something. And so Schiller put this because there's an intro and then there's X amount of time of weird interpretive dance. And then like John said, it just ends. And also maybe Buck just needed a breather tonight. The man's been working overtime.
Or maybe
yes,
conceptual art was too similar to Sun Ra. And they were like worried that they couldn't go too far with it.
I can only hope you have as much to talk about when we get to Sun Ra as opposed to all these lead ups.
Oh, you just wait.
So you think this was like a last minute, hey, Schiller, we need a short piece. That's what you're saying? That's your bullshit theory?
That's my bullshit theory. I agree. There's not much to it. I agree with John. It's bad, but it doesn't get bad enough to be good.
Right.
I just feel like they were like, what can we do? And maybe, Tom had this idea kind of half in his head because I feel like if you work on it longer, you get to the idea, yes, Lorraine should be in it. I think we all agree Lorraine could pull that off. And I don't know. I was trying to come up with a reason. Maybe it's just a bad sketch as to why it felt short and not.
That's okay. We're allowed to have bad sketches.
Yeah.
Yeah. But after this, this is the last sketch where we have any cast in it because our next sketch is the Franken and Davis show. So they come out to do their beloved sumo piece. But Al insists on introducing in the audience his wife and kid and the girl that Tom lives with, or the woman. I forget what he says.
The girl, Suzanne, the girl that Tom lives with.
Yes. And Tom freaks out and decides that now is the time to come out of the closet and announce that he and Al are homosexuals.
What?
And
Can I say it now?
yeah, you can say it.
1978, baby.
But yeah, they really go all in on the we are homosexuals, and Al Franken freaks out. And it turns out that his wife and kid did not know, despite Tom's belief that they did. And the kid tells him how much he hates him, and the wife and son storm off. That's the bit. And then Al goes off stage. He freaks out, walks backstage, and Tom says, "Don't put that gun to your head." We hear a gunshot, and then he collapses. Yeah. Got very dark very fast.
It did. It took a dark turn. Yep.
It was such a missed opportunity because the whole thing could have been about how they do sodomy, and it would have been, and it would have been a perfect ending on the season, on the sketch, and it was just a moment that I was waiting for it, and it never came.
Buck comes out in a sumo outfit. And laughter ensues.
It was all there.
I did love their outfits. Their outfits were pretty hilarious.
Yeah, so it was very like King Tuttish what they were wearing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like this one. This is I don't know what this says about me. This is probably one of my favorite
What
Franken and
did you
Davis
like
shows.
about it?
It's just so silly. It's so stupid and silly. And I guess Al Franken didn't bother me as much as he normally does. I feel a lot of times I don't like Al's performance in these pieces. And
Well, roles are reversed this time. Usually Al's provoking Tom, and this time it's the inverse.
Tom Davis is so good.
Yeah. The only line of this that I really liked was Suzanne, the girl that Tom lives with.
I like how they double down after they think he killed himself, and they say this is brought to you by the Communist Party.
I'm glad this worked for somebody.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm with John on this one. Yeah. But we know that next we get Sun Ra, which definitely worked for
everyone.
everyone.
Gentlemen, this is the moment we've been waiting for. We've gone
Really? I agree.
about an hour and 20 minutes into this show, as far back as they could possibly push Sun Ra. He finally appears. I don't know what he refers to himself as. Finally appears and gives us some conceptual music, and it is maybe the weirdest performance I've ever seen on the show.
I mean, I don't know. I don't even want to attempt to try to describe like what Sun Ra is, because I feel like I will not do justice. You know, a free form jazz artist, right? Is that a good
You
way?
just said you weren't going to try, and then
Yeah, I
you
should've.
tried. Don't do that.
And I failed.
Yeah.
That's why. You should live and learn.
It starts out with Buck introducing them as traveling the spaceway for over 20 years. And you just knew, like, okay, we're in for a weird ride.
Some freaky stuff was going on at Studio 8H. I every time I go back to this episode, or like I'm watching through and I get to this, I'm like, who the hell is Sun Ra? Like I always forget, and I finally get to the end of this episode. I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I don't remember, because it was just like this weird performance. I don't know what happened. Like I don't know that anybody has ever asked, but I would love to like ask somebody like, what was the deal with Sun Ra? Like, did they have another performance and he just didn't get on earlier? Was it so weird and so bad? I don't know that it got pushed all the way to the end. Like it was just like, is it not good for viewers to see this before 12 o'clock? I don't know what was happening here, but it was just one of the more bizarre production things that I've seen on the show in the original era, where we just get this performance there. And yeah, I don't know.
I feel like it was always going to be one number. I don't think you're going to have Sun Ra perform two numbers, just the kind of artist that he is in watching it here. That being said, I think it has to play late. I think everything you said, it's the season finale. People are going to watch it before they go into the summer. You want to put it on at the end. You want people to see what they want to see early on. There is, though, something to the fact of them putting it on as the last piece of season 3 of the show, kind of giving a last fuck you to NBC, where they're like, we can do whatever we want, because that's the show we are. That's how big we are. We can do this to say goodbye before we go away for the summer.
That feels so like I understand what you're saying, but it feels like so like fan fiction-y, because I don't feel like there's any evidence of but I just don't feel like there's any evidence of them like doing anything like that in season 3.
I'm totally on board with you, John. Like, I don't buy that. I don't understand why they booked him as the musical guest. Right? This year, we've had some pretty big names as musical guests in season 3. And that's been great. And then for the season finale, we booked Sun Ra. I don't know why. I don't know why you would, at this point, have this last, 6-minute long number as your last sketch of the season.
Somebody's a huge Sun Ra fan on the show. I don't know who. Howard Shore, maybe? I think we've had this a couple times where it's an example of, so-and-so is a fan. They want them on the show and they put them on. This
is different than Gary Tigerman coming on with Richard Dreyfuss. They put on that they wanted people to remember characters you wanted people to remember in the summer. And then the last thing you're going to show them is a 6-minute avant-garde jazz number that I would say 90% of your audience is not going to connect with.
I mean, Jim Downey has an interesting quote where he specifically references Sun Ra. He talks about how this point in the show, they still, were going out on a limb, putting out more interesting, more obscure acts. And he actually compared it to, like the Backstreet Boys being booked several times on the show. And he compared it to being like something like that would have happened back then. They would have prompted a full-scale staff revolt. It's like, I do still think they're putting on, the non-mainstream acts. Granted, this one's like more bizarre than the others because it's interesting. It was interesting and out there. I didn't necessarily like it and enjoy it, but I was kind of transfixed. And I'm like, this is ballsy that they put this on until they cut it off early. But before then, it was interesting.
They actually do play 2 numbers. It sounds like one long one.
3 actually.
Really?
Yeah.
But this is and it's having it as the last thing of your season.
I agree with you. The closing out season 3 finale is an interesting choice, but in the overall arc, I actually like the move of putting them on.
Oh, that's it. We get our goodnight from Buck.
Interesting ending,
right? He says they'll all be back in the fall or not. That's it.
That's the whole thing. That's it. That's the whole closing. I was like, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I did not like this episode as much as I was hoping to close out season 3. And I kind of feel like that is exactly how I felt about all of season 3.
I feel like this episode felt easy. That, it's been a long season. You're starting to feel it. Like there's a lot going on for all of them. And they just sort of wanted like an easy way to end the season. And you get, a lot of interviews that talk about, why people loved having Buck Henry host the finale, because he'll just basically do anything you ask him to do. He'll do sketches that, nobody else wanted to do and all that stuff. And this felt like a Buck episode where it's like, hey, I'm here. Let me know what you need me to do. I'll play all the hits. We'll write easy sketches. And, it felt like a week where they didn't need to, stay overnight Tuesday night into Wednesday, that it was all the stuff was ready to go. And we're going to have our finale wrap party and move on to, going out to Hollywood to film some stuff.
Yeah. And he's in a lot. I mean, he's in everything except for Weekend Update and Mr. Mike until the bad sketch.
And he's in everything. Like he's featured. It's
right.
not like Nick the Lounge Singer where he's sitting in the chair and just has one line and walks away. Like he's featured in everything he's in.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting episode. Like I said in the beginning, I do feel like I enjoyed it, but I'm not sure how good of an episode it is, which again, all has to come with enjoying Buck. I ranked it already and I went to look, and as I was comparing it to the rest of the episodes this season, it kept going lower and lower and lower. And this is like, lower third probably
interesting
of the season, sadly. But you said, John, you think this is probably Buck's, at least up till now, weakest outing?
I think so. I mean, yeah. I like the one we did last time better than you guys, if I remember correctly.
You did, yeah.
Yep. I mean, I still feel like that one was stronger than this one.
Again, I think you're right.
Yeah, like again, I do feel like these are. This is a junk food episode. Like I think you can enjoy it. I still walk away not feeling like this is a bad episode of the show, but it's not like we're never going to see this on the list of like greatest finale episodes. Yeah, and I'm just thinking back to like other episodes this season. I think you could almost make an argument for every other episode as to why there was something like fascinating about that episode versus this one. So I wouldn't be surprised if on some people's lists, like this is towards the bottom of their episode rankings from this season.
Do you guys think it's because they played it so easy? Like because other than the Sodom Chamber of Commerce, everything literally is recycled.
It definitely was for me, because I just felt like everything felt like I knew when the beats were coming. Like I knew what the next laugh was. And I just felt that way throughout the entire episode.
Yeah, and just thinking back, like Buck Henry and the band, I think is the gold standard for Buck episodes. That's probably the number one. That's the season 2, episode 6 one. His one in season 1 towards the end of the season with Gordon Lightfoot. I remember having a great time with you guys talking about that one. So like I can't not consider that. I think the other season 2, the one at season 2, episode 22, also fantastic. So like we're talking about a few of those beginning
when we had
ones.
Shower Mike. I mean, there was a great sketch in the season 2 finale.
Yeah, and again, I mean, his first one is obviously the first time we get to meet him, so I feel like that's solid. And then Leon Redbone, I think I liked it more than you guys, so I can understand why you may have that as like 5 out of 6. But I think we're talking like I think the season 3 Buck episodes, if we're going to rank these 6, I think they may be at 5 and 6 right now.
Right. Yeah,
I think that's true.
It was funny though, because you're right, John. I know Gary maybe liked it a little bit more, but yeah, I did not like that first Buck episode this season. So when I started trying to figure out where to put this one, I'm like, well, I know I like it better than the first time Buck hosted this season. And then I could look to compare it, and I was like, oh, that there actually there's better stuff in that first episode.
Yeah, comparatively, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think John put it best when he said this episode felt easy, and that's exactly how it felt.
Yeah, it's a good word to use. Yeah.
Well, John, all that being said, what are your best bits?
I got to go with Olympia Cafe here. I mean, again, I just love these sketches. It would be shameful if I didn't put this as my there is so much going on here. I really encourage you, if you're watching these episodes along with Brad and Gary, go watch this one a second time. There's other things that are happening beyond just the A line in the story. You can find a B plot there as well as C plot maybe for these sketches. So I do think they work. I wouldn't describe this sketch as easy, honestly. I think, the writing on this one, with Don Novello, really, really strong stuff here for Olympia Cafe. I like the nerds in this episode. I probably give that like my silver medal for the episode. I just think adding in, Buck to the, having that chemistry with Jane really worked for the sketch. And then I think, like I said, I think this is a sketch that, if I remember correctly, a lot of people don't love, but I do think that the Sodom Chamber of Commerce for me felt fresh in an episode full of recurring, like all recurring characters. That one actually felt like pretty good.
Yeah. Brad, what are your best bits?
Nerd Prom. That's pretty much my only one. Nerd Prom. I like this. I think this is the best start to finish nerd sketch. As we talked about, I think the performances are all great. I loved seeing Jane, and up to this point we haven't seen a lot of Mrs. Loopner, so I loved getting more of her character, and I think Jane flushes that out really well, almost now on par with Bill and Gilda, who have been doing it well the last few times. And I loved watching Buck love being in that sketch. He was so good, and he played so much like Steve did last time we saw Steve in the last nerd sketch. So I love Nerd Prom. I think it just has so much going on, and it's just start to finish is a great sketch.
Anything else?
No, that's I wanted to put Franken and Davis at one point. Then that was easy. It was too easy, and I think no, it's just such an easy low level bit that I'm just going to stick with nerds.
Okay. I also had nerds, and I think from the beginning of that sketch for me, it was Jane really diving into the Mrs. Loopner character and getting a lot out of her. So that was fun. And then Buck just added it to another level for me.
How great is Jane?
How great is Jane? And she was in a
lot
this
finale.
week.
We had to get it in. Yes.
She was busy this week too.
She was all over the place. And she, again, another one like Buck, she was very good in everything she was in. She just wasn't like a placeholder. She was in a lot and had stuff to do.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you for joining us again.
Sixth time.
Yes. Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about the Saturday Night Network. What have you guys got going on? Season 50 just premiered.
Yeah, you're back, which season 50 just started.
Yeah, that little season. Honestly, season 50 is if you're an SNL fan, season 50 is your Super Bowl, and we're there to cover it all season long. We have so much going on here at the SNN, so you got to come find us. If you enjoy watching the episodes and you're staying up late to catch whatever may happen throughout season 50, we're going to be live right after every single episode on YouTube. Search the Saturday Night Network, and we'll be there at 1 a.m. for the hot take shows. We have weekly roundtables on Monday that break down every single episode and go through and talk about how the episode will be remembered in the history of the show. And if you're a statistics fan, we have that as well for you. Our By the Number shows on Wednesday nights, where we talk through all of the screen time and other important stats from the week. So really get in depth with every single season 50 episode. We also have our Everything You Need to Know About Saturday Night Live series that's ongoing throughout this season. We've released a bunch of them already. We're headed towards the first 15 seasons. So if you just wrapped up season 3 coverage with Brad and Gary, maybe you want to go check out that video as well, so you don't get get any spoilers, but we do a quick 15 to 20 minute summary of every season so you can get caught up for the special anniversary show. And of course, we have other fun things at the SNN, like drafts and interviews, SNL stories. We do some fun patron things as well behind the scenes. So, come check out what we're doing over there. We love getting to talk to all the SNL fans, and I'm just super appreciative of Brad and Gary for having me back for a sixth time. The Sun Ra CD that I just got from them is just going to be playing all day long.
Yeah, if by some chance you missed the season premiere this past weekend, last night did their wrap-up show, so check it out for the season 50 premiere episode just came out. And I got to say, I love the everything you need to know about SNL series. Those are great. Like John said, 15, 16, 17-minute videos on YouTube. They're so much fun to watch. Even for guys like us who like know a lot about the shows and stuff, it's just so much fun to watch all that information crammed in such a short period.
Yeah,
it's great.
It is.
Thank you, guys.
Well, that's it for season 3 for us. Next week, we will be back with our recap show. That's it. That's all we got.
That's it. And we'll take a break. We'll be off for a little bit. We got some special episodes coming up in our quote-unquote off-season before we get into season 4.
Yeah, some fun interviews.
Trying to spend some time watching season 50.
Yeah, that'll be good. So next week, we'll be back talking about season 3 in its entirety. Until then, good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.
The Not Ready for Primetime podcast is a 2 Pints Productions production. Produced and edited by Brad and Gary. Thought about by Brad and Gary. Please rate and review. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
Calling planet Earth.